Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of Star Wars The Bad Batch, the final season, episodes 1, 2, and 3. Let's go through these 3 premiere episodes scene by scene for all the Star Wars tie-ins and animation Easter eggs that you might have missed. Starting with season 3, episode 1, Confined. The Lucasfilm fanfare shows us these shiny heads and helmets, which I believe are the same from last season, but just to break them down here, we see General Grievous, then Bucket, aka R1J5, then Chopper, then Crosshair, then a commando droid, then Wrecker, then an Imperial combat driver, then Bo-Katan Kryze, and then Hunter. There's no Echo, there's no Tech. Tech wasn't there before, but either way, our man's dead. Shuttle 135 pilots down to the planet Wayland to the Tantiss base through a storm. Lightning strikes this shuttle and they crash land outside the perimeter, so Hemlock, voiced by the icy voice Jimmy Simpson, who you might know from Westworld, Always Sunny, Zodiac, and a number of titles, he just says to leave them for the Lurker Hounds. But we don't open with the scene just to establish Hemlock as a cold-hearted jerk. This is the crashed shuttle that Omega and Crosshair will later seek out to try to escape in episode 3 before they end up hopping into the other shuttle. So really, it was kind of like an act of God that brought the shuttle down, you could say. Could be like lightning from Bendu. It's just because I speculated so hard that Bendu would be in Ahsoka. I want to see Bendu again, please. But also, it could be an act of evil, because lightning is an instrument of Sith, and it was random lightning that was actually from Palpatine via Snoke that started the fire at Luke's old Jedi training school in the comics that showed Ben Solo's turn into Kylo Ren. Now, I don't really know why the Emperor would want Omega to leave this planet. He doesn't really know what she's got so far, and Hemlock only really lets them leave so that they stay alive, but maybe there's some kind of like cosmic influence happening here, and Omega's next steps are just part of somebody's plan. But here we see Omega in her room, or her cell, as Crosshair will later put it. Water drips into the sink, and she wears the Kamino and Cloner patch on her uniform, as does Dr. Emery Carr, who we learned at the end of last season is also a female clone, just like Omega is. Omega keeps her lunch pail under her bed because, as we will see later, this is where she actually hides her sad attempt to recreate the Tuca doll, Lula. She passes Crosshair and she gives him just this sad look. Her daily task, we learn, is to draw blood from each clone to try to find a viable match for the Emperor's blood that can withstand his high M count, so that he could produce a viable Strandcast clone for himself. The screen behind them has Aurebesh that translates to biometric data status. So we're about 3 weeks into Omega's time at the Tantiss base, and she still sees Emery Carr as a potential sister figure, the way that she saw the Bad Batch as brothers. Carr's eyepieces are red laser grids reminiscent of the prison bar grid in Omega's window, reflecting how Carr is really an institutionalized future of Omega. Omega brings her blood vials to her former Kaminoan caretaker Nala Se. On the right corner of this screen are 3 circles with Aurebesh translated to stamina, speed, and strength. And I like how the shapes within these circles kind of represent those qualities. You know, that's kind of like a representation of stamina, and that scrolling up is like speed. And then this just like stoic, one half and the other half, you know, white and black cookie. Yeah, I feel like that's strength. Nala Se deletes Omega's scan and destroys the sample, something that she is gonna have to do every day for 5 months. While she and Hemlock head into a heavily guarded vault, Omega is tasked with feeding Lurker Hounds in the kennel with K9X1. While clearly Hemlock tasks Omega with this to keep her busy while they see if any DNA samples work, Omega uses this as her one kind of escape of the day as she gathers straw from these cages for her sad little doll. She has named one of her hounds Batcher because this hound reminds her of her Bad Batch friends, because this is kind of like the defective one. She's just trying to reassemble the batch, and it's so sad. She visits Crosshair and sees his hand trembling. Ever since the frigid season 2 episode, The Outpost, Crosshair's typically steady trigger finger has not been the same, but it has brought some humanity to him. While Omega returns to her room, we now see 2 drops dripping from the faucet, as if to say she is no longer alone. She scratches a 21st hash mark on her wall, telling us that she has been here for 3 weeks, and she looks out at the moon while clutching her homemade Tuca doll, her replacement for Lula, the doll that was taken by Imperial forces, and Omega found it and returned the doll to Wrecker, who fell asleep with the doll in his arms, as Omega does here. We see a close-up of the centrifuge as it ticks 1 notch clockwise, as this centrifuge comes to represent a ticking clock. We see drops of blood being added, presumably the Emperor's blood, which actually means old Sheev had to sit in like a Red Cross truck and donate a couple pints for this Project Necromancer. I just kind of want to know how he donated all this blood to do this. Okay, so now we leave ahead in time. There are at least 150 hash marks now, making this at least 5 months, which is a really long time for a kid, especially for a clone, because clones are bred to age faster. So Omega is older now, with a longer face and different hair. Her hair actually kind of looks like it's on its way to Dr. Carr's hair. Now she patiently waits for Dr. Carr at the door, and when she passes Crosshair, she doesn't even look at him. When her blood is drawn, she doesn't even wince. Nala Se and Hemlock leave the vault.
The Emperor should be pleased we accomplished a successful transfer.
Not when the M count was severely diminished in the process. If we do not match or exceed the specimen's original count, it is a failure.
Now, we're going to learn more about Project Necromancer in episode 3, but right here, I wonder if Nalase and Hemlock know that the original specimen is actually the blood of the Emperor. Like, obviously, they know this is the Emperor's operation, but I don't know if they know that it is his blood, because that would mean that they would have to know that the Emperor is Force sensitive, and I'm pretty sure that the Emperor's double identity as a Sith Lord just isn't known by everyone. They might just think it's some other mystery donor, like maybe they think they're trying to clone a Jedi. Hemlock also says match or exceed, so it kind of tells us that Palpatine was like, hey, maybe I can get a clone who's even more powerful than my current form. So Omega frees Batcher, which Hemlock says was a mistake because his pup was too weak to survive in the wild, but really he is the one who makes the mistake of telling Omega that a shuttle crashed beyond the mountains, because that knowledge plus Batcher's freedom will both help Omega in episode 3. As always, the Empire's greatest weakness is their own arrogance, and they create the circumstances of their own failures. Okay, on to season 3, episode 2, Paths Unknown. This episode begins on the planet Deveron, home to the Deveronians, known for their devil horns. A Deveronian captain stands atop a laser trapdoor before Roland Durand and Lady Issa Durand. Roland Durand appeared in Bad Batch season 1, episode 13, Infested. He's part of a crime family working alongside the Pike Syndicate, and his mother, Lady Issa, was mentioned, but we actually see and hear her now, and she is voiced by Angelica freaking Houston, Hollywood icon, Morticia Adams. I'm always amazed at the Hollywood greats that Star Wars is able to get to voice and play characters, but this might be because last year Angelica Houston voiced the Sith Mother in Screecher's Reach in Star Wars Visions Volume 2, and they're like, hey, do you want to do something else? And she's like, sure. And Lady Issa is totally a Jabba the Hutt type crime boss. These bosses love their big thrones and their trapdoors in front of these thrones. A scuffed up looking Hunter and Wrecker push a Pike prisoner in and toss Roland his severed horn. So this is the guy who took the horn. In exchange, the Durands offer coordinates for a base associated with Dr. Hemlock. While in hyperspace, Hunter looks sadly at Tech's broken goggles. Oh, they recovered them? They still have them? And beyond that, the Lula doll. Its ear is just flopped in a way that makes it look like it particularly misses Omega. Wrecker says Echo and Rex need 2 rotations before they can meet them, so I'm wondering where Echo and Rex were and why they aren't with Hunter and Wrecker. We'll probably find out in a future episode. Wrecker warns Hunter about storming an Imperial base without backup, referring to them losing Tech, and I think we're seeing some character growth from Wrecker here, because normally that guy would Leroy Jenkins into any base without thinking twice. So they land on a jungle planet that, at a glance, could be Wayland, because when we saw Wayland before, it was just storming, so we don't really have a good comparison yet. But Wrecker says it smells like rancid Jotaz. Jotaz is a predator beast on the planet Zepho that you can see in the games Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor. They find a different facility that's overgrown with vegetation and bombed out. Hunter says it was another orbital bombardment, which is just a reference to how the Empire bombs everything, including their own cloning facility on Camino. They're approached by these 2 young clone cadets, Deke and Stack, both voiced by Julian Dennison. And I love this casting because Tamara Morrison is a New Zealand actor, and so is Julian Dennison, an actor you'll know from Hunt for the Wilder People and Deadpool 2 and Godzilla vs. Kong. But they're attacked by this Slithervine, a carnivorous plant.
The Empire made it. It's some kind of experimental weapon until they lost control of it.
I really appreciate this as another example of Imperial actions hurting the galaxy in additional ways and just ruining an ecosystem with this invasive species that will long outlive the Empire. Like, anybody who lands on this planet is gonna have to deal with it. The only way to fix it is just carpet bomb the planet, or just, send the Death Star after it. Leaving the house this time of year can mean getting cold and wet, but if you have a Bon Charge infrared sauna blanket, you've got something warm and rejuvenating to come home to. Bon Charge is a holistic wellness brand with a huge range of evidence-based products to optimize your life, whether you want to sleep better, have more energy, or just de-stress, which is where the infrared sauna blanket comes in. Bon Charge's sauna blanket raises your heart rate so you burn calories while you relax to help your body release endorphins and leave you feeling relaxed and euphoric. It's super easy to set up, heats quickly, so now you can get the same relaxing benefits you would from a sauna while reading a book for 40 minutes on your couch. Bon Charge's infrared sauna blanket has free shipping worldwide and a 30-day free trial, so you can test it out risk-free. Go to boncharge.com/newrockstars and use coupon code NR15 to save 15%. That's boncharge.com/newrockstars and use coupon code NR15 to save 15%. The oldest of the cadets is Mox, whose hair is a bit longer than the others as he is taller and probably just a bit older than the other 2. One of these kids says that the clone troopers who left them behind here were just following orders, which is a common phrase used to describe the cruelty of the German soldiers during World War II. Just following orders. Yeah, but also, Nazis. facilities. Deke decides to show them the way into the ruins, and Wrecker wears Gonky, the power droid, like a backpack, and they venture into the jungle, and Deke wears his breathing mask as we see these puffs of mist and spores maybe being released by these vines. Slither vines snatch Deke, and they slice these vines off, which transform into sentient crawlers, reminding us of the crab leg form that the alien took from the detached head in The Thing, as well as the crawling facehuggers in Aliens. One of these even leaps at Hunter's face exactly the same way that the facehugger does to Ripley in the lab in Aliens. With the Tantiss base planet named Wayland, obviously these animators are really into the Alien franchise. I mean, who isn't? And like in Aliens, the existence of smaller crawlers means that somewhere there's a big mama waiting in the depths. Meanwhile, Mox and Stack find the Bad Batch's ship and marvel at a DC-17. The DC-17 is the hand blaster that's issued to clone troopers during the Clone Wars, along with the DC-15 rifle. Mox sees Lula and is reminded that these clone troopers don't leave kids behind, and that is a rare thing. Giant Slithervine tentacles attack the other three, coming from a larger body with a gaping maw in the sludge beneath them, reminding me of the original look for the Sarlacc before it had the beak put in there. And obviously the Sarlacc is based on the sandworms in Frank Herbert's Dune. They end up repelling it by throwing the whole case of explosives in and dropping in a thermal detonator that blows up inside its belly. Hunter says that he's going to drop these cadets off on an island that is safe with good people. He's referring, I'm pretty sure, to Pabu from season 2, the island colony for Clone Wars refugees, with Upper Pabu at least still left intact after the sea surge. And we end the episode with another sad shot of Lula. And then onto season 3, episode 3, Shadows of Tantiss. Another day cycle begins like any other. Good morning, Omega. Come along, there's much to do today. But is there Dr. Carr? Because you say that every day. Dr. Carr ain't kidding. It is way busier today. Guarding the central vault is this new sus character, a dark armored clone trooper. This might be another clone assassin like Clone X in season 2. The trailers caption some character named CX1. This could be him. We're gonna learn more about this guy in a future episode, no doubt. In fact, I assume this is who they're gonna send after Crosshair and Omega to go hunt them down. And now today, since the routine has changed, when Omega gets her blood drawn, notice she once again winces. It's just a slight change in routine to cause her suddenly feeling like she has something to lose once more. But this change also means that Nala Se cannot test the samples herself and cannot toss out Omega's blood. So the jig is up. While Nala Se tells Omega, "You're a danger girl," you can hear Hemlock in the background ordering additional V-Wings standing by, which sets up why there are V-Wing shuttles on the tarmac ready to pursue them later. Nala Se begins to tell Omega about Project something, but she gets cut off. Now that Omega's blood vial is in the centrifuge, its clockwise rotation functions as a metaphorical ticking clock in this episode. We keep cutting back to the centrifuge, ticking one notch ahead, heading toward a midnight position, because midnight would be when Omega's blood is mixed with Palpatine's. Ugh. The Emperor arrives at the base. That music is John Williams' Emperor theme from Return of the Jedi. Ian McDiarmid returns to voice him here.
I have been most eager to see the progress you have made, Doctor.
Hemlock reports that the exotic matter facilities have expanded, providing alteration and testing of much larger assets. The Emperor's like, "Yes, I have need of such grand designs." I'm curious to hear about these other large genetic experiments beyond Project Necromancer. I'm wondering if it could be referring to the Snoke strandcasts, because Snoke is physically larger than most humans are. But we learn the primary focus of all this. Project Necromancer. Yes, Necromancer literally means resurrecting the body from the dead. We first heard this term mentioned way later than this in the Star Wars historical timeline during the Mandalorian era, which is set after Palpatine's death in Return of the Jedi. Specifically, the Mandalorian Season 3 episode, Chapter 23, The Spies, referenced by the Shadow Council, including Thrawn's right-hand man, Captain Pelion.
Grand Admiral Thrawn's return will herald in the re-emergence of our military and provide Commandant Hux enough time to deliver on Project Necromancer.
Now, Commandant Brendel Hux in this scene is the father to Armitage Hux, First Order officer in the sequel era, and yes, as we learned in The Rise of Skywalker, a spy.
What? You?
So as we expected, Project Necromancer began all the way back here during the Age of the Empire, as Palpatine repurposed Kaminoan cloning research to create this process of finding a clone whose DNA can withstand an infusion with his own high M-count DNA without reducing any of the midichlorians in the blood. The goal being to produce a viable strandcast clone of himself. I think Lucasfilm's plan here is to produce a clone offspring of Palpatine in a test tube using combined DNA from Palpatine and Omega, or maybe Dr. Carr, so that the donor wouldn't have to be, a kid. But hey, I guess if we're just talking about blood and that blood alone being used to create a strandcast that's just a whole separate body, it's not as awkward. Maybe their plan here is to suggest that Omega is just kind of like connected to the lineage that leads to Rey. In the past week, Ian McDiarmid was actually asked if Palpatine ever had sex. His answer was hilarious. A mouse droid tries to follow Omega into the elevator and she's like, no. Omega goes to get Crosshair, who orders a stormtrooper to unlock the cell. The stormtrooper's offended that a clone might outrank him, but Crosshair says he does. Crosshair has way more battle experience than a stormtrooper would. They break out and head for the kennel. Meanwhile, Hemlock and Nala Se show the Emperor their vault, with at least 24 tanks and black and red lighting everywhere. Like for a science lab, this is definitely going for a vibe. And notice on the floor appear to be some Sith Urkatot runes. So Palpatine must have had a role in setting up this facility to kind of like sanctify it with some Sith sorcery. As we know from The Rise of Skywalker, that part of this cloning operation, in addition to science being part of it, is gonna have a bit of dark magic involved because the Sith Eternal Cult is gonna take it over. The Emperor says,
there is nothing of greater importance to secure the future of this empire. Whatever is needed to accomplish this goal, you will have it.
Yeah, by this empire, Palpatine really means his empire. Your new empire! And I love the animation detail of the little glimmer of Sheev's eye appearing from under his hood when he turns to Hemlock in the glow of whatever is inside of this tank. We don't see what's inside it, but it's likely some other body whose eyes Palpatine would be vulnerably peering into, reflecting back to him. This is Palpatine potentially at his most vulnerable. He is dwelling upon his own death, his own expiration, and trying desperately to figure out how to bypass it by setting up this whole resurrection protocol in a new clone body. In his mind, the Empire cannot and should not exist without him. He's not about setting up a successor unless it is himself. This is really the folly of the Empire. He never really set it up to outlast him. He is pure ego. Meanwhile, the blood centrifuge clock ticks 1 minute closer to midnight. Omega and Crosshair switch their blasters from stun to kill to take out K9X1. They hate this guy. Emery tries to stop them, but Crosshair nicely switches his blaster back to stun and stuns her. Meanwhile, the Emperor tells Hemlock,
there are many, even within our own ranks, who would consider much of your work an abomination, but they lack the vision that we possess.
I love this, because one wonders who within the Imperial ranks the Emperor would be referring to. Vader? Probably not, because Vader had no issues using clones during the Clone Wars, especially how cozy he was with the 501st Clone Battalion. I think the Emperor is talking about one of two people, Tarkin or Thrawn. Obviously, Tarkin doesn't care for clones. He decommissioned the clone army, but Thrawn in particular might be enough of a snob to look down on this kind of genetic tinkering to ensure the future of the Empire, because Thrawn wants to be heir to the Empire. And if Palpatine really cared about the Empire, he would set up Thrawn to be that heir. Indeed, as we see in that Shadow Council scene in The Mandalorian, there are two different plans of attack. One seems to be Project Necromancer that leads to the Rise of Skywalker, but with Thrawn, we have another path that we could take. Omega and Crosshair outrun the Rey shields. Why don't these shields all activate at the same time? Well, because they didn't in Phantom Menace either, so shut up. Hemlock says,
release the Lurkus.
Yes, how very Mr. Burns of him.
Release the hounds.
A classic Imperial siren goes off outside. Crosshair and Omega run into a creature called a Dryax, but the Lurkas pounce on it. In the crashed ship, the comms are dead, but Crosshair references a Plan 72, which Omega says she knows because Tech had her memorize all the plans. So over the years, we've heard of a Plan 7, a Plan 82, which means Shockwave, a Plan 88. These all really led up to Plan 99, which we saw in the season 2 finale. Plan 72 seems to be distract the baddies and then take over their now empty ship. And I love how when Crosshair takes out one of these clone commandos, his stupid blue helmet light flickers out. The V-Wing scramble to pursue them, and Omega calls Batcher to jump aboard. Turbo laser cannons fire after them, reminding us of the turbo laser cannons in the Death Star trench. Dr. Carr realizes that Omega's DNA is the one sample that had no M-count degradation, and Hemlock orders the fighters to stand down so that Omega will survive. Probably because he's got CX-1 who he can send after them. So what were the shadows of Tantiss of this episode's title? I think it was referring to the Sith Temple clone vault at the heart of the base. Shadows that, ironically, are cast in blinding light that revealed Palpatine's eye underneath his dark hood. The best way to support Rockstars is to grab one of these great merch designs that you can get at nerdriot.shop. Subscribe to all 3 channels of the New Rockstars network. Follow me at EA Voss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.